what does it mean to learn? Is it sitting in classrooms listening to lectures or reading textbooks? Or is it better to learn by doing? This question is about to get another answer through the creation of a symbiotic relationship between humans and machines. The organizations and institutions that cultivate human capital by harnessing the power of this new mode of learning will be the clear winners. And one such company will be Palantir. So get ready, people, for prompt engineering. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I hope you're having a great day. I have the day off, so I am doing some research into prompt engineering, which recently came up at work and is super relevant to all you Palantir investors, along with all you potential software engineers out there and existing software engineers out there. So I made the prediction a while back on this channel that AI will become the commodity. Companies who are maybe generalists in AI or create machine learning departments, and they staff them with their own data scientists, that mode of operating, there's just a lot of undifferentiated heavy lifting. That was the thing that I initially saw, and that only the best AI scientists and the best researchers on the planet will really lead to like a 0-to-1 move in models and produce really, really, really performant, really useful AI. And I think that the OpenAI Foundation, which is funded by several billionaires, including Elon Musk, I believe, has sort of made that type of breakthrough, demonstrating what I was saying, which is AI will be the commodity, which needs a platform that can incorporate the AI and produce valuable outcomes for humans, right? And that's going to be a system that, one, helps bring in data, model data, provide data governance, so that in the cases where you need to do some transfer learning on the model, or you need to do some additional training on the AI, you have the tools and capabilities to do so, i.e. Foundry. But also there's platforms like StackBlitz and the company I'm involved with, Launch It Labs. There's other companies like Versal and the Serverless Cloud who are providing these abstraction layers for developers, so they're not thinking about the low-level details of the infrastructure and code that is generated and deployed on these platforms. And I think that OpenAI and GPT-3 is going to provide the next evolution of that, which is prompt engineering. And prompt engineering, the way to think of it, so what is prompt engineering? Best way to think of it is like, you can be good at Google, right? Like you can go in and be like, a lot of software engineers often say like, I'm not a software engineer, I'm just good at Google, right? So like, and that's true to a large degree. Like there's a person called Hiram Wright. Hiram Wright works at Google with Titus Winters. And they did some fantastic work, by the way. They wrote a book called Lessons Learned from Software Engineering at Google. I highly recommend that book. It's a great read. But Hiram once said in a talk that, I firmly believe that what we really do is humans go around and write a loose description of what they want to do, and machines come along and clean it up, right? And that's a really good description of software engineering. But GPT-3 sort of takes that to the next level. And there's a lot of examples of it being used in GitHub Copilot. There's a lot of examples of it being used online through the playground, which we're going to run through in a second, which I have here. We're going to run through this. But one of the things that is clear now is that the way in which we're going to write code isn't going to be like the developer sits down and is like writing all this, verbose code over and over and over again. They're going to need to get good at prompts which enable the AI to get a zero shot. And so like a zero shot is described down here, but it's the model can get the right answer without any additional training examples. And that's an actual skill that has to be developed, right? But this has applications way beyond coding, way beyond coding. And we're going to get into a few of those in this video, which also include like training and certification. So instead of like sitting a learner down, whether that is a learner in math or a learner in Palantir Foundry or a learner in some other thing, instead of sitting them down in front of a bunch of documentation and a structured curriculum, you actually sit them down with the AI and teach that person how to ask questions in the appropriate way to get a zero shot, right? And then if you can't get that answer, what would be the right way to then train the model to give you the right answer? And that's a partnership both between learners and educators, or people that produce software like Palantir and their customers. And this sort of changes A, the tools we need in the platform, and B, where the focus for the human is and where the focus for the AI is. And what I really think is that what this comes down to doing is like the AI is not always right, and I'll show you an example of some stuff that I did, researching homework help sites, and the answers aren't always correct. So you need a way to like prove the answer is correct, and that's where knowledge training comes in. Like humans still need to know that the answer they got is actually correct, so they need to have the skills to validate it, but they also need to be able to essentially do that in kind of an automated way. Like, how do I prove that I got the right answer? Which is a little different than knowing what the right answer is. I know that sounds strange, but I'll show an example in programming how that's the case. And I think this is going to be a huge revolution in learning, education, also paths to prosperity, entrepreneurship, platforms that actually enable the effective use of AI and prompt engineering. And the big winners here are going to be the low-code to no-code platforms, and I really believe that's going to be Palantir. There is an example, there are some leading indicators of this already, which is a tool like Pipeline Builder, which is a visual tool, but also that Palantir had mentioned that they're going to allow you to build pipelines from descriptions, natural language descriptions. And you're going to see in a moment how powerful that could be as we break down some of OpenAI's capabilities. But if you already have a low-code to no-code platform, and then you incorporate OpenAI, really the visual tools you've already built and the version control systems and everything, you have to do less engineering work in there and more work by the operator, the non-technical person who's the business owner, getting them trained up on prompt engineering, and it's a really simple interface. Like, what's interesting about OpenAI is it's just a textual interface. I type a question, the AI gives me an answer, right? And then you can tune parameters to help get a better answer, right? And again, I think that this will actually be more or less what a lot of these low-code and no-code platforms are providing people. And I actually think this has applications way beyond that, like, way beyond Pipeline Builder, way beyond data transformation. I'm doing examples here where I'm creating code. There'll be further examples where I'll show you where you can do this in training and certification. And this is going to just change the freaking game, because you don't necessarily need to build CS graduates anymore. And that brings the barrier of entry down to like a trade, right? We're teaching a trade, and through teaching a trade, that then becomes superpowered by what platforms like Palantir can do, or the company I'm working with, Launch It Labs, in the gaming space and multiplayer, multi-app experience space. That puts like power of like hundreds of developers into one non-technical person who's just good at Googling, right? It's really just good at writing prompts, but also has the skills to test the answer. And that's where the nuances can come in. So let's walk through a few things I did with OpenAI today. We'll walk through this example here, and I'm also going to show why a platform where the IDE, where you can actually run code that's generated, why it must be in a browser to take advantage of this trend, right? So it's like the reason is that like an IDE where you typically write code, where Copilot is embedded today, is a huge bottleneck for non-technical folks. They can't work in that space. So you need an online environment that provides best practice out of box. So like what Foundry provides, right? Which is Git, version control, CI/CD, continuous delivery. It's already pre-built for you. You don't need to think about it. And you can literally take code examples and make them run. And it comes with a checks and testing framework in which you can test the answer the AI gave you, right? So like, we'll walk through some examples. Then we're going to take this code you're sort of looking at here, and we're going to import it into Foundry. We're going to see if it works correctly, and then we're going to write a unit test for it. So stay tuned, people. This is going to be an amazing episode, and I think it's going to get your minds thinking about what's coming next, and it's really going to change the game in technology. And I really think, again, companies like Palantir, Launch It Labs, the company I'm working with, companies like StackBlitz, they're going to be well positioned to create the next generation of engineering tools that are built on prompt engineering, designed to be trades people learn, and we build new hiring pipelines to connect those talented individuals with companies using these tools. All right. First, we're going to just show how we could create a data pipeline from using the AI that's created in code. I did one example here. So one thing about OpenAI is that sometimes it gets different answers when you feed it the same inputs, which is kind of interesting. But what we're going to ask it to do is to destructure some JSON into a Spark data frame, which is a fairly common task in a lot of these pipelines. I'm starting with a Python comment because that actually can be helpful. I believe that the comment syntax is actually used to kind of figure out what language you want to see this thing in, especially if you use a preset. And what a preset is, just so we all know real quick, and this is what prompt engineering is going to be all about, is building these presets, are pre-tuned versions of the prompts that you can use to do all these crazy things here, dude, and it's really cool, man. I think there's even one for getting chapters generated in your YouTube videos, so I'm pretty sure someone built one of those. But the ones that are up here, I mean, it's really cool if you just dig through here. Natural language Stripe API, that's pretty cool. There's also the Python to natural language, so explain like what code is doing. Think how valuable that is within the context of teaching people how to program, right? Which is something I'm passionate about in the edtech space. So there's a ton of these like pre-tuned prompts that are designed to work with the model. But what we're using is just the vanilla. All right, so I didn't really do anything. I'm just keeping this vanilla, and I'm just saying, hey, destructure the following JSON into a PySpark data frame from and let's make that one word. Creating a column for each attribute, right? Let's see what the model comes up with when we do that. It's important too that I believe you have to end these lines so it knows where the endpoint of your question is. All right, so we're getting some code. It's telling me, all right, it's starting to generate a Spark session, which I don't need in Foundry, by the way. It'll provide one for me, which is really cool, so I can just ignore all that crap. Let's go ahead. I need more characters. So the maximum character length can be a little annoying. You'll see in a minute why that's important, though. So it's continuing to output the answer. Here's my JSON string. It's booting Spark with the JSON, or it's creating a data frame. All right. There we go. Cool. This is very different than the answer it just gave me, which is kind of cool. I'm wondering if the spelling corrections. So I've got all my structured fields, and there's the data frame, right? So that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure why. Oh yeah, that's correct. Struct field. All right. So this looks kind of interesting. That's the schema, and then it just goes ahead and takes the JSON input from JSON, apply the schema. And then I wonder what it'll print if it... Okay, so that's just end. So this is interesting. Let's see if it can produce a test for this. Can you create a test in... so can you create... Let's say unit test. Can you create a unit test in PySpark for the above code? Let's see if we can do that. Okay, that's very different than the answer. Please create a unit test in PySpark for the above code. Let's not ask it a question, let's give it a command. Let's see if that helps, right? This is what the field of prompt engineering is going to be all about, like asking the right questions. Oh, there we go. It's starting to create a test for me. Again, doing some setup work. It's applying the JSON input that I gave it. This is fucking incredible, dude. Same schema definitions by the looks of it. There is a maximum character output too over here that you have to be careful not to hit. And what's interesting is that the model remembers the context of the conversation. Looks like I need to continue output, which is actually really cool because like it will get more and more context. All right, yeah, all right. It says assert equal the data frame with the schema. That's cool. All right. So it's looking at, I'm not exactly sure what as dictionary does. I guess it's producing a map of key value pairs. Or maybe, I mean, this actually looks like, yeah, it looks like it's also asserting this. Cool. Let's see if this works. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take the code and the test, bring it into Foundry, and see if it actually works. And I believe I can do that without having to supply the, well, kind of need an import data source. So what I'll have to make is like an import data source, a file with this JSON in it. I might have some laying around in there. And then, yeah, we'll see if we can apply this code that it generated along with the test and see if it actually works. All right, here we go. All right, so the codex or the OpenAI got it wrong because what it was is that in my pipeline, I'm actually trying to access a field that doesn't exist, like in my sample data. So it's this one value, and once I commented that out. That worked. Now I'm just getting an error that the array has no length 0, so I don't program in Python or PySpark. So I'm just going to ask this thing a simple question. How do I access the length of an array in Python? How do I access the length of an array in Python? The length function returns. Let's just ask it, can you print an example? This is so cool to be able to interact with this way. I can totally picture like people learning programming this way if we teach them how to ask the right questions, right? So like, all right, let's try length. Length. Oh, look. So there we go. Length names is greater than. All right, let's try that. And we're done. Passed. So I know you guys think it's probably kind of crazy that I'm psyched because this thing didn't just give me ready code, but you have to understand that like with the prompt engineering and you providing it the training examples of your system, much like these examples over here, Palantir can just incorporate this directly into their online IDE, dude. Like it could literally just be another panel in here. And I'm typing and we'll just write the code and the test. People, like this is next generation shit. It's going to blow up not only what their customers are able to do, it's like going to take people who aren't technical and turn them into like data engineers. For all of you who've been watching my channel, I've been saying we need to solve the data engineering bottleneck. I mean, it's really the engineering bottleneck, period. It's not the data engineering bottleneck. I've been advocating it's the engineering bottleneck. Seattle Data Guy kind of modified that in a post recently as like the data engineering bottleneck. But I've been saying we need to solve the engineering bottleneck, period. And this is how we're going to do it. If Palantir comes up with presets for the prompts that are tuned for Foundry and offers them through their marketplace here or doesn't and just incorporates them directly into their online editor, think how powerful this thing is now. That's what I was saying, like the sky compute layers, the people who are doing the low code, no code tools, who are moving to online editing, online IDEs where everything is managed for you, they're fucking light years ahead when it comes to incorporating this technology. So I am so pumped. I can't wait to experiment this more. But next, let's move into some other examples of how OpenAI can be used, both in the context of like training and certification and also Q&A. All right, so here's an example of using a homework help site. And I'm trying to get an answer to some math questions, right? And so this is another example of how you can use GPT-3. And Brainly is a site, is a homework help site used by, I think it's like 350 million unique monthly users. So it's a very big site. But as you can see, like, oh, I'm just going to, copy paste, and GPT-3 is actually giving me answers. Now, whether the answers are right or not is the topic of the latter half of this video, where we're going to talk about in prompt engineering why it's so important that you can actually test the answer that you get. But that is a different skill than being really, really focused on generating the output, right? And I think this is really critical. It's a little different with math because you can't really, it'd be like knowing how to write a proof for an equation, not necessarily needing to be so focused on writing, using the equation itself, right? So it's like you want to know that you can prove that the answer is right. You don't necessarily need to worry about the answer itself or like how you got there. And I think that might change a little bit of how we approach instruction in mathematics, especially as it relates to like actually incorporating these tools into the curriculum itself. But I was blown away by even just like its ability to handle word problems in addition to equations. It even gives me an answer in LaTeX at one point. I don't know if I get to that in this video, but that was interesting because it made me think, oh, well, some of the tools that are going to incorporate prompt engineering are going to have to also be able to render things like LaTeX natively. So it adds a new UI layer, but also shows why that's really, really important when you're looking at incorporating prompt engineering tools like Foundry or maybe a platform like Brainly. Like you need to be able to support all of the various types of content that comes back and provide a really positive user experience. So like here's an example of where I'm taking a LaTeX equation that was in the output of the answer, and I want to just see like what does this thing actually look like when expressed. And LaTeX, if you don't know what it is, it's a language for mathematics, right? So it's like a markup language that is for mathematics. Here I'm just like stumbling around trying to find a free renderer that I can dump this LaTeX expression into. We use LaTeX a lot at work, but it just got my mind thinking that, oh, we actually need a way to, and here it's like rendering the fraction. But what we really need here is a way to visualize it and render the output. So one powerful application of this is the use of Discord bots, right? So I wrote a simple Discord bot that is using using GPT-3 in the background. The bot is helping with Bash, so Bash programming. Basically, I'm feeding it some input saying, hey, I need some help with Bash programming. I send the question that's coming from the Discord user. Then I call the OpenAI API, and I send the user back the response that it gave it. If you want to see a demo of that, let's go ahead and just jump into, let's grab this. We'll just grab a question. I had the way we call these slash commands in Discord is you type slash and then the command, and you send in a question, right? And then the bot will go ahead and answer it for you. There we go. And I've got a for loop. Do some stuff, done, right? So this is kind of interesting. I'm thinking that I can extend this to my Discord server. When I originally started my Discord server, it was designed to be a place where people could learn to program without college. And I have this vision that we can put people into engineering careers as a trade. And so I'm going to build these out, one for each kind of channel area of study. And I'll tone the dials for the presets in OpenAI and I'll publish them, so that hopefully you get really, really good high quality answers. And I'm even thinking like you could extend this to Foundry. So imagine you have like slash Foundry help, and you could do the same thing by training OpenAI on the corpus or tweaking the dials on the corpus of public information that's available for Foundry. And then you could do some prompt engineering and help train the model on new things. So this could be a really cool way that people could generally just start learning, period. If you think about some of the use cases here, your mind will really expand. And I'm going to do another video, a follow-up video to this one, on ways I think we can incorporate this into education, help closing knowledge gaps, and teaching engineering as a trade, teaching Foundry certification. I think there's some really powerful use cases here. So where's this all going, right? So what I believe Palantir could easily do, and is probably working on, is embedding OpenAI as one of these panels in here, so that, for example, you have all these panels that appear and down here. And you could just have like AI assist. So this is one example, and you could just embed the OpenAI model. And where that would be useful is like, let's just say I've written a poor unit test. This is actually a really poor unit test. It's just verifying that the input that I give it produces the following columns, right? This could actually be really improved. We could look at the types of the data returned. We could look at the values of the data returned. We could use more inputs, right? Because we have very little inputs. We have no edge cases like nulls and all kinds of things that couldn't be cast and all these other things. So we could really improve this unit test. Now imagine we just copy it, right? Because I'm lazy. I'm hanging out. It's Friday night. The Palantir Weekly is about to come on. And I'm kind of in a hurry. Now imagine this is embedded over here, right? So I'm a lazy developer, wants to watch the Palantir Weekly. How would you improve this unit test written in PySpark, right? And let's see what the model figures out here. I'm sure we'll think of something. What are the suggestions? All right, so consider using the unit test. Yeah, I know, but Palantir has their own. Create a Spark session in the data frame. We don't need to do that. In the prepare test raw function, assert that the data frame schema is the same as the expected schema. Yep, that's a good suggestion. In the test, yep, I would agree. So yeah, we could definitely apply those latter two suggestions. But it does point out that what Palantir really needs to do is do prompt engineering and create their own presets and train the model on the specifics of working in Foundry. So for example, in Foundry, I don't need to create a Spark session. There's one supplied for me by their unit testing framework. And there's actually some good examples of how to train this model out there on the internet. One guy did a demo of how to rewrite Cypress test to Playwright, which I'll leave a link in the description for that. And it shows how easy it is to train this model on tasks that you want it to learn. And so Palantir could easily incorporate this whole thing in here. And as a lazy developer who wants to watch the Palantir Weekly, I could probably go as far as to say, okay, after it's been trained, okay, please apply, if I could spell, those suggestions, right? And output the result. All right, let's see what it comes up with. Now we have to imagine that this has been trained on Palantir, right? Like on their way of writing code. But yeah, and then as a lazy developer, I get a better unit test, right? I copy, I paste, and if it's embedded directly in here, all you need is a button that basically says use suggested code, don't use suggested code, and you apply it. This is gonna this will be software engineering in the future. This is gonna be dope, dude. I can't wait. Sign me up, right? But the other things where this is really, really useful is Foundry comes with Foundry Academy, right? So it has its own academy with all these trainings and tutorials. And what's awesome about OpenAI is you can also train it on knowledge bases, and you can tune the model for the learner, right? So like, if we know what type of actor you are within an org, the model could be tuned to work with you. And again, we just moved to a model like, instead of inundating the person with knowledge and like, this is how you do something, the whole thing is rewritten as prompts. And you come in here and you start, okay, this is lesson 1. First task is to X. And then you type it in, but imagine this is embedded in the Foundry Academy. And then you can go ahead and start learning that way by letting the model coach you on how you're going to learn things. That's incredible. I also think that platforms like this, like Foundry, like Vercel, like Launchit Labs, like Serverless Cloud, anything, especially StackBlitz as well, anything that's web-based, it reduces the barrier of entry. I don't need to set up an environment. I don't need to install any software. I have a basically best practice platform in which I don't need to think about anything other than writing the code that delivers business value or producing the data pipeline or building the ontology. That's a perfect use case for embedding OpenAI into your tools and your products, in my opinion, because it's going to solve the engineering bottleneck problem. So I think the future is looking very bright for Palantir. I can't wait to see what they come up with on how they're going to use this technology. I can't wait to see how platforms like Vercel and Launchit Labs and Serverless Cloud also leverage this technology. The trend in the industry has been building infrastructure from code, and I think that the platforms are the infrastructure, and the AI is going to be the thing that produces all the bulk of the code, and you just need to figure out a way to test the answer. And platforms like Palantir are ideally suited for this. I encourage you to read the documentation, which is, I'll leave a link in the description, on OpenAI. I'm just starting out in my prompt engineering journey. I've got a lot to learn. I get to do it at work though, which is really cool, and I get to like apply the lessons I'm learning. And I can't wait to show you what I uncover on this channel, and I can't wait to see what Palantir comes up with. So stay tuned. Get ready for the Palantir Weekly. It's up next. And hey, maybe this is the future of software engineering. All right, people. I'll see you next week.